Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch, and this is going to be the solo episode for week 5 of the college football season. Maul and Pops are out, so you just get me for week 5 going into a really big week in terms of college football. We got multiple big games starting off Saturday. We've got Florida State going to Virginia. I know it's the only reason I say it's a big game is because a lot of people, especially Vegas, and that's what I mean by a lot of people, have this game being close. Right now, they've got Florida State as a 6.5-point favorite. It's really sort of predicting them to look ahead to next week where they travel to Miami to play the Hurricanes. You also have TCU playing Arizona State. Arizona is a minus 2.5-point favorite. And then going into Saturday, we have a full slate. We've got USC playing Illinois, Notre Dame playing Arkansas, Washington playing Ohio State, Ole Miss playing LSU, Auburn playing Texas, Tennessee versus Mississippi State, Oregon versus Penn State. And then for me, the big finale, we've got Alabama going to Georgia between the hedges in Athens. Right now, Georgia's a 3.5-point favorite. We'll get into all those games, breaking it down. What I thought we would start off talking about was, I know we've been on a heater here as of late with the rankings, taking a look at the rankings this week, going into who the AP poll has as their top 10, and then I'll break it down from there. We won't go through the entire top 25. You got Ohio State coming in at number 1, Miami at 2, Penn State number 3, LSU 4, Georgia 5, Oregon 6, Oklahoma 7, Florida State 8, Texas A&M 9, and then rounding out the top 10 with the first one-loss team in the top 10, and actually the first one-loss team to be ranked, Texas, coming in at number 10, down 2 spots from 8. The big thing out of these rankings is we're going to know a lot more about these teams, particularly ones we haven't seen on a big stage. Who am I talking about? Penn State, Oregon. Last year, Penn State, Oregon have a really good game between those two teams. Oregon comes out ahead of the Nittany Lions last year. It's one of those ones that when you look at last year compared to this year, mainly Penn State is the same team. Oregon has had a lot of changes. Last year, they lost, Penn State did, against Oregon in the finale, December 7th, 45-37. As you remember, that was in the Big 12 championship game. Aller had 226 yards passing. Allen had 124 yards rushing. And then one of the bigger factors, Tyler Warren was the leading receiver at 84 yards. And that is definitely going to come back into sort of the play of me talking about how these teams, I think, are going to perform going into this current week. In terms of the top 10 rankings and sort of the rankings overall, I know me and Maul were talking about it. I think one of the things that I want to do just to start the episode off is sort of give you what I know me and Maul were talking offline. Me and Pops have also been talking off the show in terms of just how would we rate it? And one of the things that we talked about is how much the top 25 should be really fluid. Shouldn't matter that Ohio State won the national championship last year. Why? It doesn't matter in the NFL. And why does it not matter? Because it's a different team. This Ohio State team is not taking anything away from the Buckeyes this season. They're 3-0. Are they still a top 25 team? Absolutely. But last year's national championship has zero to do with this year's team. They return Jeremiah Smith, brand new quarterback, brand new running backs in terms of starters. They lose Judkins and Henderson. Defense, wildly different, especially on the defensive line. Losing Sawyer, losing multiple guys on that front to the draft. It's a different team. It's not, and this is where you get in a debate with people. It's not about that Ohio State's not a good team. It's just when you look at the season of how it's gone so far and who's had to play who, and especially now that time has developed, where do you see teams? Prime example, like Ohio State will sit back and talk about Texas. And right now, Texas doesn't look good. But if you want to throw out another team that you sit back and you go, man, those wins that we really thought were great aren't looking so great. LSU is coming in at number 4. Think about it. Who did LSU play first? Clemson. Clemson, they lost, they beat Clemson 14-7. Close game. The following week, Clemson gets really sort of close call against Troy. If Troy had more depth, I really think Troy wins the game. What happens the following week? Clemson loses to Georgia Tech. Then everyone sort of thinks, even Vegas does, they have them as a 10-point favorite against Syracuse, thinking, hey, we'll get back on track. What happens the following week? They lose again. Clemson's 1-3, and their only victory is against Troy. So that the closeness now of that LSU Clemson game, you sort of sit back and you go, man, was LSU really that good? Because they struggled putting away a Clemson team that in the weeks following hasn't looked good at all. In fact, they've done nothing but lose against really any type of competition outside of FCS schools in Troy. So I look at the LSU game and it's like LSU they've fallen one spot from 3 to 4, mainly due to Miami going up to the number 2 position, the AP poll. But from a standpoint of their victories and being touted, one of the things that Maul brought up that I thought was a great point, why do you think LSU's ranked high right now? Is it because they beat Clemson? Or is it because that for so long we've seen Brian Kelly lose that first game at Clemson, or lose the first game of the season, that when they go to Clemson and they win, we then just go, oh, LSU's finally a good team because they won their first game? Is that what we're saying? Because when you look at years in the past, like especially last year, they lose to USC. Turns out USC wasn't a great football team last year. Really struggled. They'd lose against Michigan, multiple other teams along the way. This year, they beat Clemson. Close game, 14-7. 14-7 was that game. When you look at it now, you sort of sit back and you go 14-7. Or excuse me, it was 14-7 for a little bit. 17-10 was the final score. My bad on that one. But from a standpoint of it was a 7-point ball game, Clemson looks terrible. Their offense has struggled against every team that they've played against. The LSU game now sort of, you turn that diamond and look at it from a different angle and you go, maybe it wasn't that LSU was so dominating. Maybe it was the fact that Clemson just isn't as good as we sort of had them thought to be. And I'm a prime example of that. Me and Pops had Clemson winning the Natty, and that dream has died. It's gone. Clemson's out, period. Is there a mathematical chance that they could win the ACC at this point? Yes, because we're so early in the season that Miami, Florida State, and Georgia Tech, and now Syracuse, could have more ACC losses and fold down the stretch. And if Clemson were to win out, there is a mathematical probability that they could get in. Do I see that happening based upon how Clemson's playing right now? Absolutely not. But there is a possibility. But from that standpoint, you look at LSU and you go, man, I don't know if they're ranked appropriately now. Why? Because, well, who have they played? Now, I get before the news of Mateer having his hand broke, you look at Oklahoma and you go, man, they beat Michigan. I don't think Michigan's a great team. I think Auburn is actually a pretty good team, especially on the defensive front. They looked really good against that Oklahoma squad. The offense, I think that did Arnold keep him in the game? Yes. I think that if Auburn had a better quarterback, they win that game. That Auburn's a good football team. Oklahoma won. Why are they not ranked higher? Why is Oregon one step ahead of them? Oregon hasn't played anybody. Georgia, yes, they beat Tennessee at Neyland, which is a great win. That's a difficult place to play. Probably one of the hardest places to go play on the road, not just in the SEC, but in the country. It's 100,000 plus fans. If it had been at night, it's even harder. The only place I'd honestly put as a tougher location to go play is in LSU at night. It's just, you can smell the bourbon from 5 miles away. The fans are ready to go. It's super loud. It's a competitive. It is different in Baton Rouge at night. Period. So from that standpoint, I sit back and go, why is Oklahoma not ranked higher? When we were talking offline, the team that we had, the number one team, it's Miami. Miami beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame, yes, has 2 losses against good schools, against Miami, against Texas A&M, both of which are in the top 10. Notre Dame doesn't have a good win. They beat Purdue, which it is a Power 4 school. It's one of those ones where it's not a great win in terms of it's not this like, they're not a really strong opponent, but you know what? It's better than Georgia in terms of playing Marshall and Austin Peay. Who's going to win? Purdue versus Austin Peay, Purdue versus Marshall. You can give me Purdue on both of those. That's what I talk about in terms of when you compare opponents, you have to at least be willing to give Notre Dame credit for going out and beating Purdue compared to those 2 schools. But in terms of the overall, you sit back and you go, Miami's got a pretty good record in terms of who they've played. The same thing that you could say, Miami compared to Oregon. It's like they played Montana State, Oklahoma State, who we know is bad. Gundy got fired. Northwestern and Oregon State. Are 3 of those schools Power 4? 100%. Are 3 of those schools, maybe not Oklahoma State, capable of, beating Austin Peay? Yes, 100%. Capable of beating Marshall? I'd say the odds, if Vegas were setting the line, would have them favored in the game. From a standpoint of, have they played better competition? No. For me, I look at the Miami versus Ohio State equation. Yes, Ohio State beat the number 1 school at the time in Texas. The number 1 school at the time was determined by the AP poll. Since that point, no one is sitting back going, man, Texas is a juggernaut of a team. In fact, I think the only reason Texas hasn't lost a game is because they really haven't played anybody since. Arch is out there flexing on Sam Houston. It's not a good look. For Texas, their record is not indicative of how they look so far since that game. The 3 wins really mean nothing because they haven't played anyone of merit. They played San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston. They do go to Florida, this week, and then they end up with the Red River Shootout, which will be a very interesting game now due to Mateer being out, broke his hand against Auburn, had surgery. They're saying a minimum of a month, which is going to knock him out of the Red River Shootout. We'll see who is in the backup wings of Oklahoma. It may and probably will, just depending on the backup, destroy Oklahoma season in terms of a CFP seed just because of who you have Oklahoma playing going forward. This week, they got a pretty good chance. They play Kent State, next week on the 4th. Then you got the Red River Shootout on the 10th or on the 11th versus Texas. On the road then to South Carolina, who hasn't looked good, but it's still on the road with the backup quarterback, versus Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama. That is a tough schedule. They're hoping that he is back around that Tennessee to Alabama timeframe. You just don't know how the hand's going to heal up, especially they didn't go into a lot of detail on what that injury was, but it is on his throwing hand. If he can't grip the football in its pain, he's not going to play just because he's not going to be accurate with the football. You can't risk him going out in there and getting hurt again or just not being able to compete the passes that he needs to. So from that standpoint, Oklahoma's in trouble. But from the standpoint of where they're at ranking-wise, you sort of sit back and go, why are they not ahead of Oregon? Because they have better wins than Oregon has. Against Penn State, who's Penn State played? Nobody. Now this week we get them. So I'm just saying that in terms of when you look at these schools, for us, we had Miami number 1. That was our big one. And then for me and Maul, we sort of differentiated. I had Florida State number 2. And it's really close with Oklahoma. I think Bama is a really good school in terms of how they're playing right now. That is a good win for Florida State. And then the other part to Florida State is Florida State has been absolutely murdering the opponents that they played since then. I get they're not good schools, but from a standpoint of how does Florida look playing them, Florida State looks dominant, absolutely dominant. So you can't take that away from it. I think that number 2 and number 3 is a toss-up between Oklahoma and Florida State at that point. Following them, I think that you have to look at, I would sit back and say it's Georgia. Georgia's win over Tennessee. I think that if Tennessee and Texas played on a neutral field right now, who would I give the edge to? I give it to Tennessee. I think Tennessee's a better win for Georgia than Ohio State's win over Texas. I'd put Georgia there at the number 4 position. Going from there, you sit back and go, well, who do you like then? This is where you start to coin flip. You got Texas A&M, whose win is over Notre Dame. Oregon doesn't have a good win. LSU has Clemson and Florida. Those 2 wins now really pale in comparison to who those teams are and sort of what we thought going into this season. They're not great wins now. And then you have Ohio State over Texas. For me, I think the Texas A&M win over Notre Dame, they were right there about to get beat. They did come away with a victory, but it wasn't this, man, Texas A&M really showed Notre Dame that game. Ohio State really controlled Texas's offense. I like that a little bit more. So that's why Ohio State's at number 5 for me, followed then by Texas A&M. I think then you're looking at the LSU above Penn State and Oregon, just because Penn State and Oregon haven't played anyone of merit that I would sit back. At least LSU went and played at Clemson. Clemson's not a good ball team, but it's a better opponent in terms of a Big Four conference player than the teams that Oregon and Penn State have played. That's just where I'm at. Texas is not in the top 10. Texas shouldn't be ranked above Indiana. They shouldn't be ranked above Texas Tech. There is a lot of other teams that they shouldn't be ranked above. They shouldn't be ranked above Tennessee. They shouldn't be ranked above Iowa State, Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Missouri, USC, and it is because they haven't played of anyone. And I'd say the same for Bama. Bama lost to Florida State. They shouldn't be ranked above teams that are undefeated in conference play and undefeated overall of Power 4 schools. Why? They have a loss. And since then, they've played Wisconsin, who is a really bad Big 10 school, and Louisiana Monroe. This week will determine so much for Alabama in terms of who they are as a team. That being said, let's get into it. Opening game, in terms of that I talked about going into it, was Florida State, Virginia. I know the experts in terms of Vegas have this game being close, and a lot of people like this game to be close. I sort of like it when a school knows that they think it's going to be close going in. That sort of sets the tone. I really like Florida State's defense. When you go back and watch the Alabama game, they are physical. Safeties are flying down, laying the wood on Alabama running backs and players in general. They play with great aggression, and I like that against a Virginia school that is going to try to run the football. Do I think that maybe they come out a little slow? Possibly. Why? It's an ACC rivalry. Florida State hasn't played anyone since Alabama. The real question is how does Virginia, I think a lot of questions are going in asking how does Florida State stop Virginia's running attack. I really think that better question is how does Virginia stop Florida State's quarterback? Until someone can contain him and really, hey, to beat us, you're going to have to throw and we're not going to let you run. I still think it's Florida State's game to win. Do I think they win by more than a touchdown? Yeah. I like Florida State in the game. TCU, Arizona State. Arizona State's not played bad. They did have the loss against Mississippi State, which was sort of unconceivable that with less than a minute to go in the game that you leave a Mississippi State wide receiver one-on-one with the only opportunity for Mississippi State to win the game or even tie. They couldn't tie because of the score. They needed a touchdown, and you gave them one-on-one coverage on the outside, and they hit it. That's not a good sign for Arizona State. Those are things that I look at from a coaching perspective. They are at home. I do like TCU in the game. Arizona State's -2.5. I always say that Vegas gives the home team a 3-point favorite, so they're sort of leaning TCU at a half-point favorite. I like TCU in the game. that is my going in prediction for the game in terms of TCU. Then looking at the noon kickoff game, you've got USC, Illinois. Illinois, we talked about it a few weeks ago when I got asked, who do you think is one of the more overrated teams? It was Illinois in my mind. I still do not know why Illinois was ranked as the number 9 team in the nation. Number 9 going into last week. At any point when you watched them play Indiana, did you feel like they were a number 9 team? The answer to that riddle was no. The better question is at any point last week, did you watch Illinois play Indiana and feel like Illinois was a top 25 team? If you put yes, then you qualify to be on the AP poll for a voter, because apparently they still think Illinois is the number 23 team in the nation, which is mind numbing. They got absolutely boat race. It was not a game. It might as well have been playing an FCS school for Indiana. It looked literally for Indiana, it looked like they were playing Indiana State the day before. They won 63-10. 63-10 against you. You're the number 9 school. The number 9 school. They beat Indiana State 73-0. Like it's the same game. It is the exact same result. I mean, hats off to Indiana. They came in there and absolutely dominated Illinois from the start. From that offensive line for Illinois could not control anything. And Indiana had their way on their offensive side of the football with the Illinois defense. If I'm USC and I'm Lincoln Riley, I have one thing in mind. I know that Indiana won the game 63-10. My goal for USC, if I'm the coach, is to win by at least the same, if not more. If I'm Lincoln Riley and I have a chance to score 80-something points, I'm scoring 80-something points. Why? Because it's going to be a comparison game. That if USC gets to the end of the season, and let's say they have a loss, and let's say Indiana has a loss, they're going to talk about how they played the same opponent. Let's say USC struggles. Let's say they win it like 24-17. They come away with a win, but it wasn't pretty. I guarantee you that is something the committee, they're going to bring up. Oh, well, Indiana, they beat them 63-10 and USC struggled. And that will be the narrative. So if I'm Lincoln Riley, I am trying to absolutely embarrass Illinois. Vegas thinks that Illinois is going to keep it close. They only have USC as a 6.5 point favorite. I love USC in this game. I think USC comes out and they're extremely explosive. Their offense has playmakers at the position of wide receiver. I think USC dominates Illinois throughout the entire game. If you had the ability to, if I had $10,000 that was just free and I didn't need it, I'd put 10,000 on USC to cover the 6.5. No problem. I love them in the game. I think they're going to dominate Illinois on both sides of the football, and USC is going to blow them out. That's just my prediction. I think that USC needs this type of win to really start climbing in the ranks. They're only 21. They're undefeated. 4-0. I get that the only school they've played really is Purdue and Michigan State in terms of Power 4 schools. Michigan State was undefeated. They are still a Power 4 team, undefeated, went and beat them. It is a good win for USC. Playing a Power 4 school, regardless of where they fall, is better than playing Austin Peay. That is a good win. Is it a great win? No. Whoever wins the Oregon-Penn State game, that's a great win. You know the other school is good. You know the other school is going to be competing for a playoff slot by the end of the year. That's a great win. I don't think that you can say for Indiana that Illinois is going to be competing for a playoff spot by the end of the year based upon the performance that we saw. I don't think anyone outside of maybe just a homer for Illinois is going to be putting money on Illinois to make playoffs now. Everyone's sort of like they're done. Unless they have a miracle and win some really big games in the Big Ten for the rest of the season and go undefeated, Illinois is probably out of it. That's why I like USC. The next game, Notre Dame, Arkansas. I've seen a lot of people predicting Arkansas to win the game. I think that they have a chance to win the game, My biggest issue with Arkansas is that when you look are they a good team? Has Green played well at the position of quarterback for them? 100%. 100%. He has looked really well. However, when you look at their games, Alabama A&M 52-7 win. Arkansas State 56-14. Back-to-back losses. 41-35 to Ole Miss, to which you sort of sit back and go, okay, maybe Ole Miss is a good team. Who do they play next week? They do play a non-Power 4 school that, as of right now, is probably in the lead for getting that 12th slot in the college football playoff in Memphis, and they lose. Now, how did they lose? They lose running back. They have the ball ready to kick the game-winning field goal. They hand it off, and their running back fumbles the football inside their own red zone. Memphis runs the timeout, wins 32-31. It's a bad loss for Arkansas. It gives me pause in terms of you gave up 32 points to Memphis, 41 points to Ole Miss. Do I think that Notre Dame has a super explosive offense? No. But do I think that Notre Dame has a pretty good defense? Yes. It is going to come down to Green, Arkansas's quarterback. If he can make big plays, I think that if Arkansas can get into the 30s in the score, they have a great chance to win, and I'd probably give the edge to Arkansas. However, if this game stays under the 30s, and especially under the 20s or low 20s, it's Notre Dame's game. I think Notre Dame's back is against the wall. They're 1-2. You have losses against Miami. You have loss against Texas A&M. Are those horrific losses? No. They lost to Northern Illinois last year and made the college football playoff. It ended up going to the CFP National Championship game. But from a standpoint of you're not playing in a conference, you're not going to have a conference championship, to have 3 losses, it doesn't really matter starting off the season 1-3 how you finish out the year with no conference championship. It is going to be very difficult to argue your way in if other schools from other conferences, even if they didn't play in their conference championship, are sitting there with only 1 or 2 losses. It's going to be hard for Notre Dame to argue their way into that conversation. That's why I like Notre Dame in the game. I think they have their back against the wall, and that's going to help propel them in Arkansas to get the victory against Arkansas. The next game up, 3:30, you got Ohio State, Washington. This is one that I got to see a little bit of Washington play. The question I have for Ohio State is now for Ohio State, they're going to start getting into a little bit better competition, especially from the defensive standpoint. Post Texas, they played Grambling and Ohio. Not good competition. This week, they're at Washington. Then they played Minnesota, at Illinois, at Wisconsin. It's really, after this Washington game, it's not until they play Penn State do you really start to understand anything more about Ohio State. And then it's Purdue, UCLA, who's absolute garbage, fire their head coach, and Rutgers before the game at Michigan. So this is really one of 3 games that I'd honestly say Ohio State is going to have just a test to. My test for Ohio State, how does Julian Sayin look? Can the offense find rhythm and produce points? Texas has a good defense, and they showed it against Ohio State. Ohio State has not been tested with a good defense since then. That's what I want to see out of Ohio State. Do I think that Washington has the ability to win the game? 100%. Do I think they do win the game? No. I'll take Ohio State going to Washington. I've just yet to see someone outside of Michigan really test Ohio State. Now, I know people are going to say Penn State. Penn State has not tested Ohio State because they still have James Franklin as head coach. Yes, they've beat them before with James Franklin, but in a year-in, year-out basis, if you had to bet the house on who's going to win the game, you're going to pick Ohio State because James Franklin cannot be relied on big games. Plain simple. The next game that's pretty intriguing, LSU at Ole Miss. I think the big one is that it came out that Lane Kiffin's daughter is dating the linebacker from LSU, and he tagged the post that had that and just said, I'd take the over in the game. The over is 54.5. The only thing that gives me pause is I remember the last time that Lane Kiffin referenced the score, it was when he went to Tuscaloosa with Ole Miss to play Saban for the first time as the Ole Miss head coach at Tuscaloosa. And before the game, talking to a reporter, he said, get your popcorn ready. Ole Miss was then ran out of the building by Alabama. They're not playing Nick Saban in Alabama. They're playing Brian Kelly in LSU. This is what I was talking about earlier for LSU. You've played Clemson 17-10. You played Florida 20-10. It took 5 turnovers. And granted, your defense calls those turnovers. Great. Florida's not a good school. Are they talented in that? Do they have skill positions? Yes. But at no point do I think anyone, when referencing Florida, has anything to do with them being a good football team. It has more to do with the fact of how in the world is Napier still the head coach of Florida. That's the only thing that we've talked about. We talked about it going into, throughout the season last year, is that you sort of sit back and you're like, man, I really feel like Bill Napier is going to get fired one of these weeks. And still somehow this man survived it. I don't know what dirt he has on Florida, but it's juicy because there's no way that he'd be the head coach anymore. Florida is a shell of what they were with Tim Tebow. And since that point, when Urban Meyer and them left, Florida has been nothing but exactly what we're seeing right now. Did they have a good year under Mullen and get to the SEC championship? Yes. Lost to Bama. They fired Mullen. And since then, they've been a dumpster fire. So I just sort of sit back and I look at LSU and I go, I think that you're going to get a better test in terms of an offense from Ole Miss. The question is, if Ole Miss had Jackson Dart from last year, I give this game to Ole Miss. I really do. I think that Ole Miss wins the game if they have Jackson Dart. I'm still not sold on Ole Miss's quarterback just from the games I watch, especially the Kentucky game. The Kentucky game, there was just times that you saw them in terms of their play, their passing game, that you were not inspired. You can say the same when they played Arkansas. Did they win those games? Yes, they beat Kentucky 30-23 and they beat Arkansas 41-35. But from a standpoint of, were you really sitting there going, man, Ole Miss's offense looks talented? No. Like, did they win the game? Yes, but at no point were you like, man, I'm really blown away with the offensive firepower that Ole Miss has. It looks a lot like last year. It doesn't look like that. So that for me is where I just sort of sit back and I have some question. I think that LSU's defense is more than capable of winning the game for LSU. The question then becomes, can their offense find success? They should. Can they run the football? I think that they have the playmakers on the outside that if they can run the football and allow some of their bigger wide receivers to get one-on-one matchups, I think LSU comes out victorious. Right now, Vegas has Mississippi as the 1.5 point favorites. I'm taking LSU in the game. Next game up, you got Auburn going to Texas A&M. Right now, Texas A&M is a 6.5 point favorite. What Auburn did versus Oklahoma should tell you that from a defensive standpoint, Auburn can give teams fits. If I'm Texas A&M, I sit back and look at my defense and go, did you watch Oklahoma's defense? Because they sacked Arnold double digits. Did Arnold cause a lot of those? 100%. Held onto the ball way too long in the pocket. I was talking to them all about it. One of the things that we said is, if you were an offensive coach for Auburn, you really want it to grab Arnold and be like, hey, if you get to 3 Mississippi and the ball's not out of your hands, just run, man. Run. At least get us some positive yards. He just held on to the ball for far too long. But even think about it. If I was to tell you before you didn't watch the game and I just go, hey, Oklahoma had 10 sacks in the game, you'd be like, man, they killed Auburn. You go, well, it's actually pretty close. Those are the things that I just sort of sit back and it gives me a pause with saying that I think Texas A&M is going to win the game. We have seen Texas A&M have struggles offensively. The other struggle that they had was a defensive, game against Notre Dame. Did they beat Notre Dame? Yes, on a last-second touchdown. But they gave up 40 points to Notre Dame. 40. If you ask me who's the better offense, Auburn or Notre Dame, it's Auburn by a mile. I don't like Notre Dame's offense at all. So with that, I think Auburn goes in and beats Texas A&M. I know that is a difficult environment to play in. It is a 3:30 game. It's not as difficult as playing there at night. But I like Auburn to go in and make a statement win over Texas A&M. I think Auburn should be ranked. That they should be in the top 25. They should. Who's played better, Auburn or Notre Dame? Auburn has. Auburn should get that nod. For me, they get the nod going into Kyle Field at 3:30. Next big game, Tennessee, Mississippi State. For as much trash as we've talked about Mississippi State, here they are 4-0, but now they are getting into the absolute, teeth of their schedule. Starting off, they went to Southern Miss, beat them, had a huge win against Arizona State at home, 24-20. Then they play Alcorn and Northern Illinois. Now, when you look at their schedule, there's just hopes and prayers for Mississippi State. First, Tennessee, at A&M, at Florida, versus Texas, at Arkansas, versus Georgia, at Mizzou, versus Ole Miss. God help us. Does Mississippi State have the ability to win? Yes. Do I think they win? No. Why? It's a passing. I don't think that Mississippi State is going to be able to create the pressure on Aguilar to find success long-term in the game, especially when it gets into the second half. From a defensive line standpoint, I question Mississippi State's ability and depth to affect Tennessee late in the game. Georgia found ways to do it. Why? Georgia has depth. Do I think that Mississippi State has a good starting front? Yeah. That's why they're 4-0. Have they played anyone outside of Arizona State? No. But from a standpoint of, do they have a good enough front to compete early on? Yes. It's the depth that matters. And I don't think Mississippi State has the depth to handle Tennessee late in the game. Tennessee's a 7.5-point favorite. I like Tennessee in the game. Then coming into the big two games in the evening. We'll start off with the Oregon-Penn State game. Talked about it. Big Ten championship last year. Penn State kept it close. A lot of people really thought that Oregon was going to boat race Penn State right out of the building, and Penn State played exceptionally well. Penn State got into the playoffs and played very well. Where do I think the game comes down to? And we talked about it a little bit earlier in terms of when I talked about the game last season. Penn State, their leading wide receiver was who? Tyler Warren. He was the Swiss Army knife for that offense. Had a lot of just huge plays, not just in that game, but throughout the whole season for Penn State. Penn State's biggest issue is they lack skill players on the outside. Can Penn State run the ball? Yes. Does Penn State have a Jeremiah Smith or anyone close to him? No. They don't have the outside threat that really forces you in terms of having respect for the passing game over the top. Why does that matter? Oregon has always been, and until they prove it otherwise, last year against Ohio State, it showed in the playoff game, they did not have the personnel up front to compete with that ground attack in order to stop it. And what happens when you can't stop a rushing attack? You have to bring a safety in the box. Most teams are going to run Oregon, Penn State, they're going to run a 3 wide receiver set with either a tight end, 2 running backs, or just if they have a tight end, they'll just run a single running back. But when you think about, and what are they going to do against that type of offense? They're going to run nickel. What is nickel? You got 4 linemen, 2 linebackers, and the rest are corners and safeties. For a rushing team, when you think about a man-on-man block, you've got 5 offensive linemen going against 4 defensive linemen, leaves 1 free. Now, if you have a tight end in the game, he can help either assist in blocking of the edge if the edge is good, or he can flow up to the second level and try to get a linebacker, especially if they're trying to get on the outside. He is that cutoff guy if they're going to run to the strong side. It also gives the ability for a guard and center or guard and tackle to double up on someone in order for that other person, depending on which way the ball is being ran, to move up to the linebacker position to get a block. But from a standpoint of if they have a tight end in the game and now you got 6, you do have a hat on hat for the immediate front. So when teams are running the ball good, meaning that they're able to get that push and they're able to get a lineman or a tight end on a backer and get them blocked, most of the time the offense is getting 4 to 7 yards a pop. When that starts happening and they're unable to stop that rushing attack with that formation, what do they start doing? They start bringing the safety closer and closer to the box. What's the box? It's 7 yards off the line of scrimmage. When you start getting that safety downfield into the box, what does that create the matchup of? It creates outside matchup problems because now you only have a single safety over the top. We talk about the hashes all the time when you start watching and they talk about film of trying to pull the safety to the hash. If the quarterback is in a passing set and he's trying to pull, they have a safety down the box and he's trying to throw a deep pass, what he's most likely going to do is he's going to look the direction that he wants to pull that single safety over the top to. He's going to try to pull him to that hash. Why? Because the distance now between the other side of the field is greater, and if he has a good wide receiver on the outside that's now one-on-one coverage, there's no way that safety is going to be fast enough to get over there to affect the catch itself. He may be fast enough to get over there and help make the tackle after the ball's already caught, but not to break up the pass. So it really makes it to where you have a one-on-one matchup. It creates a lot of problems for a defense when you are in nickel and you can't stop the run. Why do I give a huge explanation just in a little bit of a basic concept for a defense to say for Oregon, they are going to sell out to stop Penn State's run. They may bring a safety down in the box depending on how it is going with Oregon's front. When they bring that safety in the box, the biggest issue for Penn State is they don't have the outside talent in terms of a real star potential that is capable of consistently beating one-on-one coverage. So it really makes it to where it's still about 50-50. Sometimes the corner's going to win. Sometimes the wide receiver is going to win. But you don't have that matchup now. And it makes it to where for Oregon, they're happy to bring the safety in the box to stop it because no one on the outside scares them. And guess what? This year, they don't have to stop Tyler Warren. They don't have to go against that big body tight end. The questions for Penn State on the opposite side is we really don't know who Oregon is offensively. Last year, they have Dylan Gabriel. They have a lot of pieces on offense. They have a new quarterback this year. They've played well. Yes, you can look at that Northwestern game. They didn't win as convincing as you thought that they would. But from a standpoint of has Oregon been doing Oregon things in terms of putting up a ton of points? Yes. 59 points against Montana State, 69 against Oklahoma State, 34 a little bit low against Northwestern, and 41 against Oregon State. But their defense has limited teams to 14 points total in terms of the highest scored by an opponent, which was Northwestern. I sit back and I look at it from the key to the game. I think Oregon will be able to compete defensively against Penn State is can Oregon's quarterback make the plays that he needs to come away with a victory in Penn State. It's going to be loud. It will be a whiteout game. It's at night in Happy Valley. It's everything that you could want if you are a Penn State fan for a big game like this. You're at home. You get to control the environment. It will be loud. Oregon, though, sort of has, in my opinion, the perfect offense for that type of environment. They go no huddle a lot. They know how to run the silent count. It makes it to where they have some ability to really affect Penn State in what Penn State wants, which is a great environment. I like Oregon in the game. And it's mainly due to the fact that I don't think that Penn State has the skill positions needed, especially in the terms of wide receiver. And with the loss of Tyler Warren to the draft last year, I don't think that Penn State has that talent in the receiving core to really make Oregon pay for them selling out to stop the run of Penn State. And that's why I think Oregon comes away. I think Oregon has enough talent offensively to really stretch Penn State into some bad situations. Give me Oregon in the game. Right now, Penn State is the 3.5-point favorite, and that's going to bring us to really the game of the week. I'm a Bama fan, but Alabama, Georgia in Athens at night, 7:30. We've seen nothing but the catch of Ryan Williams last year in order to propel Alabama. Alabama gets up huge last year. Georgia comes all the way back, takes the lead, have it for one play for Jalen Milroe to hit Ryan Williams. Georgia tries to they get all the way down into the red zone in order to try to tie the game. Carson Beck throws a pick in the corner of the end zone, and that sealed the victory for Alabama. We know how the rest of the season went for Alabama, and then Georgia ends up making the playoffs, gets beat in the opening game for them in the playoffs last year. Georgia's 3.5-point favorite. Where do I think that this game ends in terms of who's the victor and why? Alabama is 9-1 against Georgia in its last 10 games. That only loss coming in the national championship game in Indianapolis for Kirby Smart's first national champion at Georgia. From a standpoint of Georgia, they know the history. There's a lot of rumors of doing the blackout. Last time they had a blackout at Georgia, it did not work out well for Georgia. Coach Saban, Julio Jones, they absolutely put on a show and beat Georgia handedly. Now, that was a long time ago. These are two completely different teams. Georgia, where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses going against the Tide? Strength. Has Alabama had 2 good weeks against Wisconsin and against Louisiana Monroe offensively? Yes. But we know that they've had their struggles. Going into last year, Alabama has shown from an offensive standpoint that they are not perfect, that they really, when the games get tough, they do not have at quarterback the guy that is either a Bryce Young in terms of very, very efficient with the distribution of the football, doesn't throw turnovers, gets the ball out quickly, very accurate. I haven't seen Ty Simpson be that. Then you have the other side where you have Jalen Hurts, who, yes, great thrower, not as good as Bryce, but in terms of a mobile quarterback, is someone that you go, man, we talk about that sort of that nickel defense of stopping the run. The other issue with a run, I don't see this out of Aller as much as why I didn't preach it, but from a running quarterback standpoint, we talked about sort of a hat on a hat. Well, what will you do with a zone read? You leave the end free. Why? Because that tackle is going to the linebacker. So they leave the end free. If he crashes on the running back, quarterback's gone. If he stays at home to keep the quarterback from getting the outside, what do? You hand it off to the back. Bama doesn't have that at quarterback. Georgia sort of does with Stockton. I don't think that Stockton is as fast as people make him out to be. Does he run the zone read well? Yes, but from an Alabama standpoint, it's not Milroe of last year. They don't have this elite speed at the position of quarterback. Can Ty run? Yes, but I would argue that Ty Simpson is more of your A.J. McCarron in terms of a scrambler than he is anyone else. He's not going to dazzle you with his speed. He's someone that's going to keep the play alive and scramble. And if he needs to run, he's probably going to gain maybe 5 to 10 yards at most, depending on, but he's not going to run anyone over. He's not going to, outrace anyone. He's not going to get the edge. He's not that guy. How Ty wins is through throwing the football. So if I'm Georgia, what do? I blitz. I blitz until I'm going to make it so that Alabama cannot run the football. We talked about with the safety coming in the box. I'll do whatever I have to. Bama will not beat us running the football. If Bama beats us, it is because Ty Simpson has the game of his life, and he is just deadly accurate. And I will take my chances with Ty Simpson if I'm Georgia until he proves that he is capable of beating me. That's my entire game plan if I'm Georgia. I do, because the run helps Ty.
If he can just turn and hand the ball off and he's gaining 5 or 6 yards, guess what? I can make it to where now I can call play calls and I'm not needing 10 yards. I just need 5 to 6 yards every play. I will dink and duck around the field to move me down the field because guess what? I can easily hand the ball off and gain 4 yards a pop. I just need you to distribute the football. But when they are stopping the run, you put Bama in the longer situations, which makes it to where, guess what? You got to hold on to the ball longer as a quarterback because you have to allow your wide receivers to get downfield, and it gives the pass rush a chance to get home. That's my goal if I'm Georgia. If I'm Bama defensively, where I get nervous for Bama is they really have shown, were they physical against Wisconsin? Yes. And against Louisiana Monroe? Yes. Against Florida State? Absolutely not. They were not physical, especially, and where does that matter? The run. That's what Georgia's going to try to do. Georgia wants to run the football. I'm not sold on Tyler Stockton. And I think anyone who is sold on him being a national championship level quarterback, I don't see it. He has a lot of shades of Stetson Bennett. However, from the standpoint of Stetson Bennett, did Stetson do exactly what Georgia needed them to do? 1,000%. But who did Stetson have? Stetson had Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey, and had probably one of the best defenses in college football in the last 20 years, both of those years. The year they beat Bama and the year that they, mopped the floor with TCU. They don't have that. We saw that last week against Tennessee. Georgia's defense is not the defense of old. It's not that. Georgia's offense is not the Stetson Bennett offense. They have struggles running the football. They have a great offensive line. They do have a really good offensive line, but from a standpoint of the Georgia of a few years ago, they're not that. Do I think they're still good enough to beat Alabama? Yeah. I've got Georgia in the game. They're minus 3.5-point favorites. It would be, how do I want to say this? This would be a typical Saban win if Saban was still the head coach. Alabama's not favored. You're going in Athens. No one believes in you. You've lost the game. It sets the stage for Saban to do what he did best, motivate his team, find ways to win, control different aspects of the game that Georgia wanted to control but now can't control. That was what Saban was best at. Every time that you doubted Alabama in these big situations, Saban found a way to win. It was incredible. I haven't seen that under Kalen DeBoer. Did he beat Georgia last year? Yes. And I think that's also fresh in the mind of Georgia. They know what happened last year. There is no shock in what's about to come out of the gates for them in terms of Alabama trying to beat them. It's just one of those ones that eventually, as everyone says, Rome falls. I pulled out that stat of 9-1 against Georgia in the last 10 appearances. I expect it to go to 9-2. I like Georgia in the game until Bama shows me against really good competition that they can play with the physicality they need to win a big game. I'm not sold. I'm also not sold that Ty Simpson's that guy that is going to lead the team to victory. Is he capable of it? Yes. Have I seen it yet against good competition? No. And until I see it, you can give me the dogs to cover 3.5, which wraps up week 5 for college football. A huge week. Sorry to anyone that's getting dragged to a wedding or actually getting married during this weekend. This is why you don't have fall weddings. They're abomination. I'll never go, especially during any week that football's on. So I just sit back. It's a great slate of games. We're going to know a lot more about teams. We're going to figure out who are these teams. How does it look going forward in the season? It's a big week. Look forward to it. As soon as we wrap up this week, try to get either Maul or Pops back on the convo, and we'll get going in our breakdown of week 5 of college NFL action and talk about next week, which is going to be the big one, Florida State going to Miami. We'll figure out more about both of those teams and really where the ACC standings lie at the end of next week. But I do want to thank you guys for tuning in. It's time to pull chalks. We'll talk to you next week.